Alrighty, so we're on episode 11, Bipolarcast. We talked about metabolic intervention as an aid to help our bipolar disorder, specifically the ketogenic diet. And we interview both patients, so people who are doing this for their own illnesses, as well as some doctors. Today we're talking to Chloe. So Chloe, do you want to give us like a little background on, how you got into this, how you found keto, what the story is there?
The reason I started experimenting with diet is because I got dermatitis, autoimmune dermatitis, and it was supposed to be a very simple disease. And the doctor gave me antihistamine and steroid cream, and somehow it wasn't working. And 6 months, 12 months, nothing was working. I went to my mother, who was a doctor as well, and she couldn't figure out what to do. So I did something that you weren't supposed to do, which is Google your own symptom. And so the word inflammation came out, and I asked people, what do you do when you have inflammation? And they said, there's this diet called AIP, autoimmune protocol. And basically, there's a list of food that is commonly inflammatory, and you remove them and then you introduce back one by one and see what's the problem. So I started with that, and because that at the time made more sense to me, and I didn't heard of keto or carnivore at that time. So I started to remove food one by one, and I noticed the more food I removed, the better I felt. And towards the end, I was left with pork shoulder, steamed broccoli, and sesame oil. So that was the only thing I was eating. So I ended up doing keto. And to my surprise, I felt my emotions stabilize a little bit. It wasn't like this huge up and down, and I was feeling stable and calm. And which I thought was a bit strange. So I went online, started looking up people who were feeling like me, and people were saying that when they went keto or when they upped their fat, they started feeling more stable. The anxiety was improving as well. So I thought that was really interesting. And then after a couple months doing keto, another problem showed up, which is I started getting bloating. The more vegetable I ate, the more bloating I got. So I started removing the last bit of vegetable from my diet as well. So I ended up with just carnivore, and I was already very meat-based. I was already eating whole food, so I wasn't expecting a huge improvement. And something interesting happened. It was, I think, maybe 2 weeks into the strict carnivore diet, and I woke up in the middle of the night and I felt happy, and it was very extreme, like ecstasy happiness that I freaked out a little bit. And I went on Reddit, went on to the carnivore subreddit, and I feel high. Is this normal on carnivore diet? And people said, people were coming out, they said they used to have depression, and when they switched to a carnivore diet, they had similar experience. They felt this almost euphoric feeling. So that really piqued my interest. I never felt that happy in my life. So I thought I don't care if I die of heart disease tomorrow, I'm going to stay on this diet forever. And I hid it from my mother for 6 months to make sure that it actually is the diet that caused this improvement in mood. 6 months later, there was no relapse. My mood was getting better and better. I think my personality changed, that the personality that I knew was me, wasn't me. I was very confident. I was very self-assured. And I was very motivated and very social. I socialized more. I was not as introverted as I thought I was. I waited for 6 months, and it just, so I had to admit it was the diet that was causing this change. So that was when I decided to dig deeper, actually look up the lectures by Dr. Georgia E, by Dr. Paul Mason, and everything I can find on this diet and mental health and etc. Yes.
So Chloe, it sounds like you kind of discovered it by accident, where you were tweaking your diet, you were doing different things, you were eliminating different foods, you were doing this autoimmune protocol, and then you gradually just escalated to where you were eating only meat. You only discovered later, after you'd been doing the diet for a while, that this could be a treatment for your bipolar.
Because on the surface, it didn't make much sense. If you say eating only meat can make you healthier, even mentally, it didn't make sense to me at the time. So I wouldn't have tried it for mental health. I was surprised that keto worked for mental health as well. At least keto, you got some evidence, but carnivore, there was almost no papers or researches for me to look up to. So that it was very surprising. It was a side effect, and my dermatitis cleared up very fast. And I think in 2 weeks, everything was gone. So that was really fast. Yeah.
That's really interesting that you described this transition into it. It's very commonly reported in people that do this, that the first 3 days they can get, the transition, you're lowering your glucose maybe for the first time in many, many years, and you're raising ketones possibly for the first time in who knows how long. And the transition seems to, it can generate us, and Chris Palmer's talked about this as well in his patients, that in the first 3 days, there can be hypomania, or there can be like a really elevated feeling. And I experienced that when I first transitioned. It was like I felt quite high for, a couple of days, and then it kind of leveled out into normal mood. Is that something it seems very common that this happens, and it's once the ketone levels stabilize that the mood seems to return to normal as well? Is that what you experienced? Is that accurate to what you're describing, or did your mood stay high? Or
I think it was in the beginning as well. It was in the beginning for a couple of days, and it's really, really dramatic feeling that I never experienced before. I actually thought someone maybe dropped my food. It was very dramatic.
Yeah.
But it was strange because when I was on keto, my ketone level was pretty high. I think my morning fasted ketone was 4.5 or above, and it stayed that way. But it didn't feel that way. It was only when I eliminated the last bit of vegetable that I started feeling this.
Interesting. And so did your mood then go to a place where you felt it was stabilized after the high? What was your experience after? I mean, certainly we did this study where we looked at several hundred people posting in online forums describing this experience, and quite a significant amount of them were saying that they felt an initial high when they transitioned onto the diet, and then as their ketones and glucose stabilize, the mood levels out and becomes level. Was that what you experienced? Or
yeah, I think so. I think there was first 2 or 3 weeks, I feel like some people say it felt like the movie Limitless. It felt like they took the pill and they just felt like a Superman.
yeah.
So that was how I felt. That was how I felt the first 2 or 3 months, 2 or 3 weeks, and then it kind of stabilized. But I feel like my personality has changed for good, because I was more confident and motivated, and that stayed. Like the really dramatic feeling wear off. But yeah.
And what was your mood like typically before you started keto? What would be a general day for you?
I mean, before keto or while I'm on keto?
Before ketosis.
Before keto, I think it just, I think I didn't know I had brain fog before I got rid of brain fog, so that was seems to be a common thing people experience. And I didn't know I had this perpetual depression until I got rid of it as well. So my mood was always at a lower level. And even I think I had more depressive episodes and hypomania episodes, and yeah, I think when I was little, when it was really bad, when I was little, I think it was around 12 that everything started, and I think around 12 was my first suicidal attempt, and that was a period of time that I ate a lot of bread. So I think gluten was one of the triggers that I am very sensitive to, and then other than that, I think depressive episodes really, really bad sometimes that I went through with suicidal attempt. I think at least once a year. So it was I think it was really serious, but I live in Korea where as long as you're not causing trouble for other people, you don't really consider it a problem. If you're a hypomania and you're causing trouble for other people, then you get treatment. But other than that, you suffer in silence.
Yeah.
What did the treatment look like before you discovered keto? What was that process like?
No, there was actually no treatment because my mother was a doctor and she wasn't a psychiatrist, but she didn't believe in mental illness, and she thought you're not depressed, you're just ungrateful, and it's kind of a common attitude around here. And I think it was until a decade later when I was in my mid-20s that I got official diagnosis. And by that time, I knew too much about drugs to take them, and I didn't respond very well to talking therapy. So I just decided to kind of just try to figure things out on my own. I think I was so used to feeling depressed, I didn't thought it was a problem. I thought that was just my personality at that time.
It's so sad that this this myth is kind of prevailing, and it's here in the West too as well, obviously, but there's like a lack of gratitude is the reason why you can't get up in the morning. People don't understand this is an energy imbalance. This has nothing to do with gratitude. You could be the most grateful person in the world, but if your body's running on the wrong fuel source, it's going to make things very difficult.
Yes, yeah, because my mother would say you have a roof on your head, you have a family. There are people who have it worse than you. Why are you depressed? So it made sense to me logically, but it seems that my mind just didn't work that way. So yeah.
The way I used to describe it was like, it's like, you've just been shot in the leg and someone's like, oh, but you need to be grateful. But it's like, I know, but I've got a bullet in my leg. But it's like, oh no, but you need to be grateful. And it's like, you need to appreciate the things you have. It's like, I know, I understand that, but there's a bullet in my leg that's very painful and this needs to be addressed. And that's what it feels like with bipolar. There's a physical process that's happening that you can't fix psychologically. So yeah, I'm sorry that you also experienced that, and I'm sorry you also experienced the guilt thing, because I can definitely relate that, feeling like they're trying to basically make you acceptable to society, and as long as you're not causing trouble, it's okay to be completely sedated to the point where you can't function. But that's not a great life for anyone either. How would you describe doing ketosis or carnivore to the things you tried before? I guess you tried a lot of things with your mother you were mentioning, and how different or similar was ketosis compared to things you tried before? Was it a drastic difference in mood that it created, or was there anything else you found that had that effect?
I think before I thought it was how do I describe it? I thought it was a problem with the way I think. So I think I should read a lot of books on psychology, on religion and philosophy, and think the right thought. If I think the right thought, then I can fix it. Then I don't have to let my thought drive straight to suicidal rumination. So that was what I was trying, and that approach never worked. It felt like I was driving a car with the brake on, and I didn't have control over the wheel. And once I transitioned my diet, it felt like I was actually driving the car. I was in the driver's seat. And when I say I should stop thinking a certain thought, I actually stopped thinking about a certain thought. So it's like, I got control over my own thought, and that was something very foreign to me.
I relate to the philosophy thing. It's because bipolar, it was bipolar 2 you suffered from, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And yeah, bipolar, it drives you into like such states of depression that you just can't conceive of like why you want to keep living sometimes. And so you look to answers for life. You're looking to like, why am I here? What is this all about? And it just seems to drive people with bipolar inevitably to philosophy. I'm just interested, what did you read, if you're willing to share?
I think I started with a lot of religious book because like I saw the podcast, I saw what you said, and saw what a lot of people share. It's like, why should I live in agony? Why am I born into this earth just to live in this kind of agony? Because there must be a reason. Am I being punished? Is there a God? So it started with religion, and then philosophy, and then there were some self-help books, and there were also psychology. But I think I was 15, 16, and I didn't know what bipolar was, so I didn't know how to look for books that were specific to bipolar. So I just grabbed whatever I can find. And yeah, so, but they say the same thing in the very scientific psychology books. They tell you shouldn't blame yourself. You should try to look at your thought from an objective perspective. But a lot of those theories, those tips I learned, I understand them mentally, but I can never apply them.
Yeah, it's, you can go through, we were talking about this with a counselor called Nicole Laurent the other day, and we were saying you can try to like Freudian your way out of bipolar, but it's not going to happen. There's no amount of psychoanalysis that can deal with this bullet in the leg that we're describing, like this physical condition that you have. But things like diet can address those physiological concerns. So it's funny how the first line treatment is often, for when someone's depressed, is to go down this kind of like psychology route. Actually, if they could fix their biology first, then their psychology might work well enough to be able to think about these things. And so you sent some notes here about your experience with, so you'd started with an autoimmune protocol. And so you're doing an elimination diet, and this inevitably led to doing keto, and then you transitioned to high-fat carnivore. This was after being raised on the paleo diet. So you're saying that eating whole foods and maintaining stable glucose and ketosis wasn't enough, and you actually needed to go further to eliminate plants as well to see results. And you were so you'd consulted Georgia Eid, who's a fantastic psychiatrist that's been doing this for a very long time, an extremely reliable source of information on this. So that was a really good move. I think that there's only very limited, number of people doing this at the moment that are like public psychiatrists that are doing this. So thank you to Georgia for doing that at the time when there was very few people talking about this. And you'd looked at plant anti-nutrients, or talk on plant anti-nutrients. I hadn't even heard of this until more recently. Do you think, how much of a difference did it make cutting out plants for you as well as doing this carnivore keto approach?
I think that was the part that I was the most hesitant to share, even with my mother, because it didn't make sense. It's very difficult to wrap my head around it, because vegetable is supposed to be healthy. But when I was on keto, my mood was definitely stabilized, and I felt I felt like I don't care. Like if someone yell at me, I don't care. So that was nice. But on carnivore, it was a whole change in personality as well. So on carnivore, I was more sure-footed. On keto, I was still on carnivore, I was sure-footed. I was confident. I was motivated. I was driven. I was happy, and there's a whole elevation in mood I didn't experience on keto. And I did keto strictly for about 2 or 3 months. So the contrast in the experience was very drastic. And it was something, the last vegetable I cut out was steamed broccoli, and which was healthy, which was really, really healthy even among vegetables. So that really confused me. So that was when I started looking into what could be something in the plant that I'm not reacting well to. And it's also interesting because my mother she went to trying to study Chinese medicine, herbal medicine, and she uses both Western and Oriental medicine together. And when she raised me on a plant-based diet, none of the herbal medicine will work on me. And it was only when I transitioned into carnivore that some of the herbal medicine started to work on me. And when I was on a very, very simple carnivore diet with just meat and salt and water, I could really see how different plant matter affects me very differently. So yeah, I think what people commonly think as healthy food people should really look into it, because if you have a mental illness, because you might react to it very differently from other people.
What was your experience like when you started eliminating all these foods? Was it hard for you to maintain a discipline and not to eat a lot of these foods when they're just everywhere?
In theory, it should be more difficult, but I think carnivore diet was interesting because it has so little choices that you don't have to debate in your mind, and that there's like less psychology wrestling. So you just go for meat, and it's very simple decision process. It was actually easier than keto AIP. I was surprised to find how fast my taste bud adapted as well, because I thought I would get bored. I used a lot of Asian sauces. I used soy sauce. I used soybean paste, and I thought I would get bored. But my taste bud adapted really quickly, and I grown to like meat as it is with only salt. And so the whole process was surprisingly easy. And a lot of people probably already shared that carnivore, high-fat carnivore is very satiating, so you don't really think about snacking or other foods in general.
So you were eliminating plants, but you still kept in sort of medicinal plants, is that right?
When it's necessary, like when I start getting cough, like getting a symptom of cold, instead of reaching for antibiotic, which is like very harmful in many ways, my mother would opt to give me some kind of herbal medicine.
I think that's a really important distinction with because, you know, if cutting out, you know, saying that all of something is bad, all protein is bad, all, you know, plants are bad as well, you know, nothing is that simple. Like there are, you know, even if you cut out most plants, there's still some things, like you say, that can be helpful in certain situations. And it's so interesting, this Chinese medicine, like artemisinin came out of that, and so many of the really useful compounds we have from just experimentation with food. So, you know, the fact that food can have such a good and bad impact on mood is so interesting. So you'd mentioned that many people with mental issues, especially women, feel like they need to consume above 70% fat by calorie to feel stable. Could you say a little bit more about that?
So I didn't pay attention to the macro in the beginning, because the improvement was already there. And then I think maybe 6 months into carnivore, there will be days that I don't feel as well. I get anxious or agitated or lose my patience. And I notice it's always when I eat too lean. And so I started looking at people who share the same experience. And apparently it's very common, especially for women. Men seem to be able to get away with lower fat, and they don't get as agitated. And women, they either get mental symptom, or they get cravings, or they get some people even get really loud stall when they get too low fat percentage. And I think some people, even their menstrual cycle get disrupted when they don't eat enough fat on carnivore. So yeah, I think that's pretty interesting. And I noticed some people say when they don't get enough sleep, or when they are on a certain time of the month, they need to actually up their fat intake in order to feel stable as well. So I wonder, there must be a relationship with fat and like brain chemistry in some way.
Yeah, I mean, the higher fat you get on carnivore can really help with raising ketone levels. And I've seen people report that when they go from just keto to full carnivore, their ketone levels go up quite a lot. It's not for everyone, but I guess it's because you're just eliminating everything that could possibly bring them down. Like you're really kind of, it's only meat and fat. So there's almost nothing that could possibly lower your ketones. Whereas if you're eating some other things, there's a possibility. It's also interesting what you're saying about eliminating plants, because you know, ketosis is, some people describe bipolar as like an immunometabolic condition. So it has an immune component and a metabolic component. And the metabolic component can be addressed by energy supply, like ketones as an alternative energy supply. But there could also, it might be that there's, you know, different components where some people respond very strongly to, with their, you know, their immune system overreacts to certain things that they're eating. And so it's great because ketosis eliminates both those problems, because you're taking out a lot of the things that would cause those immune reactions, and you're addressing the energy problem. For me, I think it was just an energy problem. I didn't have these responses to plant foods, but I know many people do experience them as well. So it's really interesting that you experience both an energy improvement and this immune improvement. So you'd also mentioned that dairy and eggs can be a trigger for many people. Dermatitis and brain fog, joint pain and digestive issues and weight gain were things that you had experienced from this. Can you say a little bit more about what your response was like to those things? Did you notice it in your mood?
I think dairy is particularly common, and dairy is the food I react the most to. And dairy is actually has a very visible effect on me, because it caused dermatitis almost immediately. And then a lot of people say once they go on keto carnivore for a period of time, they can reintroduce food one by one. So I tried reintroducing butter, which a lot of people do fine with butter. And I think the next day I felt like I had a hangover. The same feeling as hangover. I couldn't think. I was swollen up, and I just felt like it was back to my depressed self. So it was, and that lasted about 2 or 3 days until it cleared up. And I tried eating ghee with very little casein, very little lactose, and still caused the same problem. And the same with egg. Egg is a little better, but if I eat it consecutively for 3 or 4 days, I get brain fog, I get dermatitis, I get hives. So yeah, and when I look around, when I search in the Facebook groups, apparently dairy and eggs are very, very common triggers for a lot of people, and people experience different symptoms. And some people can tolerate raw milk, but not industrialized milk. Some people can tolerate kefir, but not regular yogurt. So it's very interesting how different everyone is.
That's fascinating. And to anyone who's listening who's wondering about this, if you have sort of permeability in your gut lining, foods can get through into your bloodstream, and the immune system essentially detects them as, a threat to the body. So it produces this immune response against food, like normal food that's supposed to be safe and tolerable for everyone. But even normal foods can produce this immune response if the gut lining is damaged, which it is in many people. So this is quite a common problem for people, and it's under-recognized how something as simple as, like, it might sound like eating eggs, how could it be that harmful? But it's because if your body is damaged, it's recognizing it as a threat. Any food that you put in that gets through the gut lining into your bloodstream is recognized as a threat. And so this was never meant to be the case. Our guts were meant to be very robust, but our modern diet and lifestyle is causing this to happen. So you'd mentioned that there was a few things that trigger bipolar symptoms for you. Could you say a little bit about what you notice can trigger symptoms for you?
I think when I also try to reintroduce things to add a little bit variety, and I noticed that coffee and chocolate, which contains caffeine as well, when the symptom is delayed, which makes it very difficult to pick up. But when I eat it for a couple of weeks straight, I get almost back to square one. I will have a whole week where I just couldn't get out of bed, just depressed and have suicidal rumination, and which is interesting because a lot of the most sensitive people will say that they cannot eat any plants, but they can drink coffee. So I was hoping I could tolerate coffee as well, but apparently it's very triggering for me. And I thought I would be safe just staying on strict carnivore, and then I started drinking bone broths instead of coffee. And bone broth is rich in collagen, rich in glutamate, natural glutamate, and it's supposed to be very, very beneficial. And then I think after a couple of weeks of drinking it every day, I had a relapse in bipolar. And this time it was hypomania. It's like I lost control of my car, and I just snapped. And that was very dramatic. And then I started looking up everything I could find. And yeah, apparently it's the everything that triggers me, bone broth and pork skin and gelatin and everything, all this food has in common is that they are high in glutamate. And apparently some people, they do react to glutamate. And it's interesting that the older studies that I found, a lot of people say glutamate is not supposed to cross the blood-brain barrier, it's not supposed to affect you, but somehow the later experiments find out that the subject actually are influenced by MSGs or glutamate. And yeah, so yeah, that's how I found out.
So glutamate is really interesting because it happens to be MSG happens to be delicious. It really makes things taste good, but it's also a trigger for even in epilepsy. You know, people can have seizures with it, and as far as I understand, people with epilepsy also have to be very careful about their glutamate intake because it's an excitatory neurotransmitter that increases the excitement in the brain. And so in bipolar, this is also something people have noticed is a kind of observation that there's been in the literature of glutamate can cause episodes of mania. And it's really interesting why that happens because it has a number of really interesting functions in the brain, glutamate. But the other thing you mentioned was N-acetylcysteine as well. Could you say a little bit about what your response was to N-acetylcysteine?
That one I haven't figure out why, but it was I tried it during COVID. My mother gave me some those COVID prevention package along with zinc and everything else. And it says it's supposed to be very good for depression and ADHD. And I saw a lot of people saying that it really helped with their hypomania as well. But the minute I took it, within 30 minutes, I got anhedonia, and it was the first time I experienced something like that. Basically, it felt like the world turned black and white, and absolutely nothing interested me. I didn't want to eat or move or work, and it was very, very traumatic and severe and instant. The reaction was very instant. I also had trembling in my hands for a couple of days, and so yeah, I also looked up if anyone was feeling the same as me, and I typed NAC and anhedonia, and apparently a couple of people reacted the same way. They say it's like nothing interested them, and some people said they liked it, and usually the people who liked it are people who suffer from ADHD, so they can kind of use that calming effect. They say it helped them focus, but apparently for some other people it's more negative.
NAC is really interesting. It stands for N-acetylcysteine, and it's an antioxidant. There are some trials of bipolar indicating that it might have some effectiveness. So it's not an unreasonable thing to try when you're bipolar. But you know, the difficulty with the antioxidant debate is if you these oxidative molecules are also signaling molecules in the body. They're not just bad, and so if you just flood your body with antioxidants, you lose some of the signaling that is important for metabolism and features of just being healthy. So it's very interesting that you mentioned that. There can be some people do have bad responses to antioxidants because you lose some of the positive aspects of antioxidants. You know, like if you had cancer, you wouldn't want to just get rid of all your oxidation in the body because that's what's fighting the cancer. So it's really interesting to hear that. So you mentioned that you stay away from things like bone broth, MSG, caffeine, alcohol, NAC, and these are all really interesting because they're in the literature for this. When you transition to a carnivore diet, do you check your ketone levels or do you just follow the diet? Do you ever take readings?
Yeah, I do. I track for curiosity. I used to have blood ketone meter, and now I have breast ketone meter, which is more convenient. But I think my ketone is on the higher side always for some reason, and my blood sugar is always on the lower side.
Great. You were saying about 4 before. That's a really high reading for most people.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Yeah, most people struggle to get above 3 or even 2 sometimes. That's really interesting. I find that a lot of people I speak to, the mood stabilization happens above 2 or 3. And then if they go below that, do you notice any point at which it becomes the mood stabilization drops off if you go to lower levels or?
I don't know about the blood ketone because it's impossible to test them often with blood ketone meters, but breast ketone, my breast ketone on high fat carnivore sometimes can exceed 90, so it's really, really high BPM. When it drops below, I think 50, I start feel a difference, depressed or anxious. And 50 is already a really high number for most people, so I'm not sure why I have to stay that high to feel stable. But yeah.
Yeah. I wonder whether the carnivore helps you to have higher ketone levels, because a lot of people have reported that going carnivore, it really boosts their ketones because you're just taking out every possibility of anything that's going to lower them apart from protein. So it's something I've considered trying, but I live in Scotland, and we just eat lots of we eat like kale and things like this. So it's a difficult consideration. I just think you can't rule out. I just can't rule out all plants, but then I don't have an autoimmune condition, and I can completely understand for people that do why that would be important and really significant to do that. But I really like your approach where you're saying that like some plants are still beneficial. You're taking specific plants that you found that help you and help your health, which is a really great approach to that. I think many people are just like one way or the other completely.
I think the big thing we've seen too is that there's no one size fits all approach to this. Like it's crazy how varied the different people do on different ketone levels. For example, I can do okay when they're a little bit lower. Some people need them above 3, above 4. I don't know. It just speaks to how important it is to do some trial and error, hopefully under the supervision of a professional to figure out what is going to work best for you if you want to try this.
Definitely, it's so varied for different people, and I think it's a really good sign if you respond to like lower levels of ketosis. I think if you need higher ones like I do, it probably indicates you've undergone a bit more damage, like because I guess I'm a bit older, but I think it's a really but I think at the same time it's different if you have an immune response, because it might not be the ketones levels that the important thing. It might just be eliminating these plants that are really affecting you. And so it's impossible to really say anything conclusively at the moment. It's just, but once we have the studies, it'll be really great to find all this out. You can see some indications at the moment that you can stratify like people with bipolar according to different markers and what they might respond to and what medications they might respond to. So hopefully in time we'll be able to make better choices about how to treat people based on their different phenotypes of this. So what has it been like for you? I found that when I got into ketosis and I was able to actually have energy again for the first time, I was like, oh my goodness, so many things I want to do that I've not been able to do in a very long time. How did it change your life having some energy? And how was life different after having some of your energy back and getting rid of some of these symptoms that you're having?
I think it's the first time, because I've been having this since I was 12, and I've been suicidal since I was 12, and every year I would try what's the most painless ways to stop living, and then this is the first time I felt maybe life can be fun. There's something to look forward to. I wake up and I'm happy, and I feel I have a purpose. I'm motivated. And it's also interesting because my mother, when she describes me, she said, you have very extreme personality, because she didn't know what bipolar is at that time. So, and it turned out that wasn't my personality. I have a very different personality that me and my mother knew of. So I'm trying to get to know who I am for the first time. And I feel like I'm more social than I thought. I like people better than I thought. And I used to be prefer a safer space. I don't go out. I don't interact with the world. And now I'm more eager to put myself out there and just try new things. And yeah, I think I'm still getting used to my new life right now. It's been only 2 years.
That's so cool to hear. And has it changed what you see for your future? Have you got different goals now that you have this energy to? What have you become interested in since having your energy back?
I think I just more I'm more interested in taking risks now. I think I used to just follow what my parents expect me to do, just go to the university and get a job. And I think right now I'm freelancing. I moved to a European country by myself, and I'm living here. And it just seems like there's no risk that is too scary for me right now. So, and that opens up a lot of opportunities. So yeah, I don't have to follow a defined path because I'm scared and timid. Nothing is going to cause me that much anxiety anymore. I can do whatever I feel like doing. I think that's very exciting.
One interesting thing that I think can happen is that when you start eating a very specific way for a very specific purpose, it can catalyze this kind of like self-awareness where suddenly other facets of your life, this has been my experience, I started living very consciously. I started thinking about not only things like my exercise and meditation practice, but like, what do I want to do to help the world? What do I want my friendships to look like? What do I want my work to look like? And I started thinking, because I was coming out of this haze of horrible mental illness, I started thinking very consciously about what I wanted all of that to look like. And it sounds like you're doing the same thing, and it can really lend itself to living a life that's fulfilling because it's thought out and meticulous, and it's not just on autopilot.
Yeah, I'm not in that defensive position anymore. I can actually go for what I want, think about what I want, and stop struggling. Yeah.
Sometimes I think with bipolar, it feels like you're just trying to protect yourself from the world because you have no energy to deal with it. It's like you don't have the resources that are normal, and it feels very much like when you're well. And I'd never experienced being well until I went into ketosis. I'd always been either depressed or like high and nothing in between. And then I realized like, oh, this is how people feel. Like you wake up and you want to engage with the day and you like actively go out into it to meet challenges. You're actually looking for things to do. Whereas when you're normally with bipolar, you're just trying to conserve as much energy as possible, just to get through the day and get to I would just try to get to the time when I was going to sleep, like I would just like, I can't wait till I can get to sleep tonight. And I would just try and survive until then. Is that how you experienced it as well?
Yeah, it just every day is just how do I get this day over with? I can't wait for this day to pass. It was very defensive and depressing, and I don't feel like life was worth living. And I remember when I first, even that little improvement when transition to keto, I feel almost betrayed because I feel like, is this how normal people feel? So for the past 29 years, I've been living like in hell, and this is how normal people feel every day. And like I want my time back.
Yeah, it's crazy. Like I felt exactly the same thing, and it was just bizarre to me. I was like, oh, the thing that struck me was enjoying nature. I didn't realize that when you look at nature, like you get this really good feeling. I mean, I kind of experienced that, but in like a hypomanic way. But I didn't understand that when you go out to a forest, you just have this calm and peaceful and wonderful feeling. And I was like, oh, this is why people like going for walks. I didn't know why people. I thought it was so boring. I was like, why? But these things are kind of normal to most people. It's remarkable that you survived that period of being and have come through to this point where you've found ketosis and become well, because it's so difficult to get through that. It's hard for people to appreciate if they haven't experienced it. What kept you going during was it 20 years you said of having bipolar? What kept you going through it?
I think I was getting better at controlling some of the thought. I think I was getting better at catching the signs that my thought is about to spiral, and I learned little tricks along the way, how to distract myself and how to make it less painful. And I don't know. I feel like I got this idea, if I achieve something, I would feel better. So I will always focus on what I can get in life, in order to make myself feel better. So I always go for the next job, the next opportunity, meet the next person, maybe with my next partner will make me feel better. So I was looking forward that life might give me something to help my mental illness, instead of just realizing that maybe there's something I can do for myself. I don't need to have anything material to be happy. And that was, yeah.
And you mentioned like now you feel a feeling of purpose about your life. Is that something that occurred to you after becoming well, that like having a purpose and could you say more about that?
I guess the burden's lifted. Now I have more mental energy to think about what I actually want, and I have the mental strength to actually go for what I want and work for what I want. So yeah, I think now and actually it changes your outlook on life. Before, if I say I want to achieve certain thing, the conversation in my mind is always negative, because you can't do this, you don't have the financial means or the family background to achieve this. And now it just, I don't need a logical reason to be positive. I'm confident without reason, and I have faith in myself without reason, and I think that's very interesting. And I don't have anything too specific right now, but like I don't lose faith in myself. I don't lose hope, and it's interesting because my financial situation is the same, but somehow I perceive my world differently.
That's it's so interesting that, you know, biological change can have those effects on someone's feeling of like purpose or significance to their life. It's so, the body and mind are so interconnected, they're not different. And it's we just hear again and again how when people get well, they're able to then reorientate their goals in directions that they really feel excited about and are and mean something to them.
I'm actually curious because given how different I think, even in the same situation, even though I know the same psychology tricks as before, I can now actually apply them, whereas before I couldn't. It made me curious, those people who suffer from bipolar and have to, the only choice is like talking therapy, like how does it work? Like, does it ever work?
It can work it can work better when you're on the diet. The short answer, I think.
Do you ever feel in some ways like you have to do so much work on yourself when you're ill with bipolar that when you actually have the energy to use that, you're like, oh, I actually have a lot of resources now to use that I wasn't aware of? Like often people with bipolar have to read a lot and try to understand psychology a lot and philosophy, or try to like, and when they actually have energy to then use that, it can be a real benefit. Have you felt some of the benefits of that knowledge that you gained when you're reading and learning about this?
I think all those knowledge definitely help, and it actually, even when you have a negative thought, it's important to know that this is temporary and this is something. This is not real, so it's important to have the knowledge. But I think before, it's like you're not supposed to be sad. It's like it's not worth losing sleep over, but there's nothing you can do about it. Whereas now, I can actually stop thinking and distract myself and think of better stuff and apply those knowledge. So right now, with the right diet and combined with that knowledge, that's when it's supposed to work. And before, without the diet, really wasn't very helpful.
Yeah, it's like you can tune up the car engine all you want, but if there's no fuel in it, then it won't, it won't run. And it really kind of, but actually people with bipolar can so tune their engine because they have to do it to survive, that when they do get the right fuel, it can really help them to thrive afterwards. I just wanted to say, like, what's happened, what you've experienced is so rare and so important in the world at the moment, I think, because patients with bipolar have never really come out and talked about what's happened with them, and it's so underground and it's so under-recognized. And me and Matt felt we've experienced such benefit from this that we have to say something about it. And I'm sure you felt the same, that you want other people who have who are like you were 10 years ago to experience this, that things can be better and can get well. What would you say to people that are struggling at the moment, like you were, you know, yourself 10 years ago? What advice and would you give them, and what encouragement would you give to them for people who are still in that situation and trying to get out of it and can't feel any hope at the moment?
I think everyone has to find what works for them, and at least in my case, when I found the right food, when I find the right diet, it was almost effortless. Whereas before I thought I have to constantly monitor my thought, constantly try to control it, or it will just spiral. Yeah, like you said, like all my effort in life went into keeping myself from thinking the wrong thoughts. Whereas right now it's really effortless. It's very effortlessly happy, effortlessly confident. So yeah, it's not supposed to be difficult. Life is not supposed to be difficult. You just need to find something that works for you. And I think we're coming very close with what you guys are doing right now. So yeah.
Thank you.
Not gonna
Keep trying, guys. Do not give up.
100%.
And I think one of the most important qualities someone with this illness can have is resiliency. And for me, my experience has been that I have fallen down hundreds of times, fallen off habits, gotten sick again, and, you know, unable to quit smoking, unable to quit drinking, going to bed late, all this bad stuff. And I just had to keep trying to put one foot in front of the other and keep tightening things up. And it's just relentless. But I think people can really conquer this illness and be successful if they have the instinct of, when something tough happens, how can I rise above? The diet can be a big part of that. Now, when things are just like, you know, it's just a horrible depression, it's not so easy. But with intelligent treatment, and including keto and good medication, exercise, things like that, I think this can be possible.
I think one thing that really hopeful is that every time I see a post in Facebook group, and there will be some people asking, has anyone cured schizophrenia or bipolar or depression with this diet? And there will be like 50, hundreds of comments, people saying like, it cured my anxiety, cured my panic attack, cured my bipolar, and all this testimony. So there are a lot of people who already benefited from this diet and haven't spoken out yet. So yeah, I think I hope more people know about this. Really, yeah.
And can I ask, what would you say to psychiatrists? I want to be respectful of your time. We're almost finished here, but if you have a minute, what would you say to psychiatrists who are understandably skeptical about this and are hearing maybe about this for the first time, and are want to find ways to help their patients more, but are maybe not familiar with this? What would you say to them?
I think when I tried to convince my mother, that it was very difficult because she's very, very well educated. She's a doctor. She can read papers, and she hasn't found anything that can prove this method works. There's no randomized control trial yet, and so it's very difficult to convince someone smart, I think. But I think something that made her trust me is that I think anecdotes precedes researches, and when anecdotes pile up and people are sharing the experience, saying how dramatic this is, and they're very certain about it, I think the least you can do is to watch, observe what people say with open mind, because if you're going to always wait for a randomized controlled trial, you might have to wait 10 years or 2 decades. And whereas if you just listen to what people say, you might be able to find a method that is very, very effective very, very soon.
It's you know, it's tricky, isn't it? Because the randomized controlled trials are the standard of evidence required by most of the psychiatry organizations and boards to do this. So they do need to happen. to get this into that sphere. There's no way psychiatrists are going to use this without them. But there was a time in epilepsy where we were waiting on trials, but there were thousands of kids' lives saved through keto for epilepsy.
Yeah.
And it was because people were sharing their story like this and sharing these stories anecdotally. And so it is a tricky period, but the thing we have in our favor with bipolar is that there's 100 years of evidence with epilepsy that this works, and we have the same treatments for epilepsy. We use the same anticonvulsants, and there's a lot of really robust scientific reasons to think that this helps on all the kind of not all, but most of the major mechanisms of dysfunction in bipolar, like neuroinflammation, neuroprotection, providing a mitochondrial fuel source for the brain, providing ketones, which is an alternative fuel source to glucose, and a myriad of other effects that are in the literature. And you can, if you Google on Google Scholar, you can find papers by me and other people like Georgia Eade and Chris Palmer and Shivani Sethi who summarize these arguments. So if you have someone that you're speaking to about this, your family or psychiatrist, and they want to look at the evidence, you can find this online. So things will change, and it won't be 10 years for the randomized control trials. I'm certain of that, but it will be. They will come. But thank you so much for speaking to us today, and thank you for sharing your story. And I really appreciate it. And I just think it's remarkable what you've gone through to get to this stage. And I just want to acknowledge how crazy it is to get through something like that for 20 years of being unwell. And congratulations for the discipline and the motivation to get to this stage. It's very rare, and we really appreciate you talking to us about it today. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me, and thank you for this podcast, because I didn't know there are so many people who feel exactly like me, and I felt less lonely when I listened to the podcast. So yeah,